FBI Director and Deputy Attorney General still taking major flack at a congressional hearing. Christopher Wray and Rod Rosenstein are still in the hot seat before the House Judiciary Committee, facing questions about the FBI and DOJ's actions surrounding the 2016 election, including charges of anti-Trump bias. Both officials vowing changes are in the works.
First, we're going to be holding employees accountable for misconduct.
We need to correct errors, hold wrongdoers accountable, and deter future violations.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live on Capitol Hill. Catherine, the president could take the stage. I might have to cut you off, but tell me about the Congress's attempts in trying to get more documents from the DOJ and the FBI. Is it going to be successful this time?
Well, Dana, the big development in the last 90 minutes is that the House has voted in favor of this non-binding resolution calling on the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who is testifying at this hour, to provide the remaining documents that are under subpoena, including documents about intelligence activities by the FBI prior to July 2016, which is when the Russia collusion case officially opened, and that vote was 226 in favor to 183. Let's listen to one of the fiery exchanges from earlier today.
Now, the Justice Department had previously provided text messages from that date. They included all the messages we now have except the "we'll stop it" text message. Why didn't the Justice Department produce that to Congress when we asked?
I want to assure you and the American people, we're not withholding anything embarrassing. The message was not in the original material that the Inspector General, he found.
Well, they're making a reference there to FBI agent Peter Strzok, and we just had some new information in the last few minutes about Special Counsel Robert Mueller and his removal of Agent Strzok from the Russia collusion investigation in July of 2017. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein did not get into specifics, but he said Robert Mueller had taken steps to identify whether Agent Strzok had made decisions or taken actions that in any way were driven by political bias, Dana.
Well, yeah, that is interesting to know, and of course I'm sure that they're going to want to ask more about that, but Rod Rosenstein speaking about that for the first time. Also, what was the general tone? Because from what I hear, it looked like it was pretty testy.
It was very testy. It's a lot of language, frankly, that I'm not used to hearing at testimony from the FBI director and the Deputy Attorney General. I'm talking about statements and questions from the lawmakers, and Congressman Trey Gowdy seemed to sum up a lot of frustration about the ripple effect, he says, of the Russia collusion investigation.
Russia isn't being hurt by this investigation right now. We are. This country is being hurt by it. We are being divided. We've seen the bias. We've seen the bias. We need to see the evidence. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart.
It's important to note that in the hearing today, Democrats found themselves in the position of really affirming and backing up the FBI director and the Deputy Attorney General, both of whom are Trump administration appointees and Republicans.
Sir, am I correct that each of you were appointed by President Trump? Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And who appointed the special counsel?
I did.
And you were appointed by President Trump?
Correct.
This will go on for several more hours, but if there is one dominant theme today, Dana, it's been this issue over the records about these intelligence activities by the FBI prior to July of 2016 and this alleged use of confidential sources, covert agents or informants that were sent out to gather intelligence about the Trump campaign. And now we've got this resolution that it's a non-binding resolution, but it kind of politically sets the table for those members of the Republican Party that really think stronger action is required, even contempt or impeachment proceedings. Dana.
All right, Catherine, that hearing is going to continue, so if there's any other news nuggets, come back to us, and we'll get you back on. Thank you, Catherine. So the political battle is heating up over who will replace Justice Anthony Kennedy. President Trump is now considering candidates for the High Court in one of the most important decisions of his presidency, as Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is blasting Democrats.
Unfortunately, far left special interest groups are already calling on Senate Democrats to oppose anyone anyone on President Trump's long list of potential nominees. The ink wasn't even dry on Justice Kennedy's resignation letter before my friend, the Democratic leader, seemed to echo that right here on the floor.
And we have this story covered from all angles. Jamil Jaffer is a former law clerk to Justice Neil Gorsuch. Mark Sherman is the Associated Press Supreme Court correspondent. And Elizabeth Wydra is president of the Constitutional Accountability Center. We're going to get started here. The president, I'm keeping an eye out. He might be going to speak in a moment. But let's start with you, Mark. I want to talk about how you will proceed to cover this vacancy, because it's not like replacing a conservative with a conservative or a liberal with a liberal. This is replacing a swing vote. And might it be one of the most important and interesting Supreme Court nominations that you have ever covered?
Well, clearly, this is one where it's been said before already, just in the last 24 hours, this gives the president the chance to cement conservative control of the court.
And Jamil, I know that you clerked for Neil Gorsuch, who was, the president's first commitment to conservatives to say that I will nominate justices that the conservative movement has wanted for a long time. You clerked for Neil Gorsuch. Of course, people keep bringing that up. When it comes to this next confirmation that the president is going to try to get done before the midterm elections, what do you think is the most important thing that you should be looking for when everybody else is sort of losing their heads about them? What would you focus on?
Well, the key, Dana, is a judge who is a conservative and who believes in the role of judges in our constitutional order, which is to interpret the law, not to make the law. That's the kind of judge that the president appointed in Justice Gorsuch. That's the kind of judge he's going to be looking for going forward.
Elizabeth, if you could tell me a little bit about just the moment that the court is in. There's a lot of big cases in front of it coming up, especially about the role of the administrative branch, the issue of smaller government, but what we're going to do also about government and in technology and how they interact with the people of the United States. Your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. The stakes could not be higher in this fight. Justice Kennedy has been the single vote for upholding Roe versus Wade, for marriage equality and broad LGBTQ rights. And I think we're going to be seeing cases inevitably come up before the court that relate to the limits of the president's power, whether he is above the law or not, has to submit to subpoenas, etc. So the stakes are huge with this, and the American people are watching.
Mark, how might the Democrats go about trying to, I guess, slow it down? I mean, they really can't block this. I guess if the president nominates somebody that the conservatives and the Republicans like, I mean, it is razor-thin margins of a majority with the Republicans, but how do you see this playing out, and do you think it will get done before the midterms?
Well, there seems to be every indication it will get done before the midterms. I think the Democrats and the interest groups that are already mobilizing are focusing right now, at least, on the issue of abortion, thinking that if they can motivate their base and make the issue more generally known among the public, they might be able to peel off a senator or two among the Republicans who has expressed support for abortion rights in the past.
Jamil, what do you think of that? Because when I worked on the John Roberts and Sam Alito nominations way back when, it also was an issue then, this issue of reproductive rights and Roe v. Wade, and a feeling by some that this is settled law, that it would not be revisited. But now, I guess, we could see it revisited. And how much do you think that that should weigh in on what the president is thinking about when he comes to choose a nominee?
Well, look, Dana, as you know from the Roberts and Alito confirmations, there are no litmus tests. This is about getting the law right and a judge taking part in their role, which is, as Justice Neil Gorsuch said, the role of the judge is not to wear a cape, it's to wear a robe. And so we shouldn't be looking for judges who are trying to set the law in one way or another. They should be doing their job and not legislating from the bench, but interpreting the law.
Elizabeth, the Democrats are very frustrated. They, of course, were bitterly disappointed that Merrick Garland did not get a hearing and a vote in that presidential election year. And they're trying to make the case that this is also an election year, though I think that that's actually going to be very hard for them to convince people that it's the same. But how do you see that playing out?
I think certainly we are in a very hotly divided political moment, and this makes clear absolutely that elections matter, that every vote matters. And, what's important here is there used to be no litmus test, but President Trump ran on a litmus test, including the litmus test of overturning Roe versus Wade, when he was campaigning, and he seems to have followed through on that. So that's something that both Republican and Democratic senators are concerned about the constitutional right for a woman to choose for herself with her family, her priest, and her doctor. All
right. Well, the three of you, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it so much. And my next guest participated in the confirmation process for Kennedy and every other sitting member of the court. It's Utah Senator Orrin Hatch. He served on the Judiciary Committee, which will hold confirmation hearings for that nominee. And, sir, we're not going to let you get out of Washington, D.C. with an easy stroll to retirement. You're going to have to sprint to the finish, and there's another nomination that has to get confirmed for the president. What are your overall thoughts about having this nomination at this point in the presidency as you spend the last few months of your career really helping the president try to get one confirmed?
Well, first of all, we're going to really miss the current justice who is leaving. Justice Kennedy's a really fine man. He's done a really good job on the bench, and I'm personally going to miss him, and I think the country will miss him. But now we have the obligation of really supporting whoever the president puts up, and I suspect he'll put up somebody of dimension and ability, and I hope that we don't let any litmus test confuse this particular nomination.
The president had put out a list in November of 2017, and then he added a few names to it. There are about 25 names on the list.
Right.
Do you have any particular favorites, or do you like to see people who have served as judges before, maybe people that maybe have served in the Senate?
Well, I don't have any favorites on that list. Everyone on that list is very, very good. I don't see how anybody can be against any one of them, but there will be people who will be, because there are people who are always trying to politicize this process. But I think most senators decry that and will want to do what they think is right.
Of course, your colleagues on the other side of the aisle, they're very frustrated, and as I've said with the previous guests, they're bitterly disappointed about what happened with Merrick Garland. And we have some sound from Senator Schumer, who, of course, is extremely frustrated, although I think he might be powerless in this situation. Take a listen to what he says.
Okay.
This is the most important Supreme Court vacancy for this country in at least a generation. Nothing less than the fate of our health care system, reproductive rights for women, and countless other protections for middle-class Americans are at stake. Americans should make it clear that they will not tolerate a nominee chosen from President Trump's preordained list.
What do you think? How should the president react to that? I mean, should he ignore that?
He should ignore it, and he should do the very best he can to pick the finest nominee that he can pick. And that whole list of about 25, every one of those is really excellent. There's no question about it. So he could pick anybody on that 25 list, and I think it undermines everything that Senator Schumer is saying. Although I understand Senator Schumer, they feel very deeply about politicizing the courts, and they want them politicized as long as they meet their political concerns. And I don't think we should politicize them at all.
Let me ask you about the process, because you know very well how long it takes to get somebody vetted and nominated, the hearings, the confirmation. At what point do you think then that you'll actually maybe see a vote on this nominee?
Well, I think we'll see a vote before the end of September. I actually think it doesn't take any more time than that. It all depends on who the president nominates and how quickly he nominates a person, because it does take a good month to vet them. It takes a little bit longer to get through the committee familiar with the nominee, and the nominee is going to have to go and meet with everybody on the Judiciary Committee, and we'll just have to see what happens. But I think properly done, this could be completed by the end of September, maybe even earlier.
All right. Senator Orrin Hatch, thank you so much. We're going to turn now to President Trump. He's giving remarks at the Foxconn facility in Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin. Let's listen.
Foxconn and a friend of mine, one of the most successful businessmen in the world. Very few people even close. And I want to thank him for investing in Wisconsin and investing in the United States. And this is just the beginning. I know, Terry, this is just the beginning. This is one of the largest plants in the world. And when you think in terms of 20 million feet, if you build in Manhattan a 1 million-foot building, that's a very big building. They don't get much bigger. And here you're talking about more. Think of it, more than 20 million feet. and that's probably going to be a minimal number. So I'm thrilled to be here in the Badger State with the hardworking men and women of Foxconn working with you. Moments ago, we broke ground on a plant that will provide jobs for much more than 13,000 Wisconsin workers. Really something. Really something. Thank you, fellas. I want to also thank Secretary Steve Mnuchin, who's here. Thank you, Steve. Secretary Wilbur Ross, Secretary Alex Acosta, and Administrator Linda McMahon, friend of mine for a long time, Linda. Where's Linda? Where's Linda? Thank you. And also, Paul just left. I said, go, because we got to pass legislation. We're passing so much. Look at what's happening with our Supreme Court. Look at the victories we've had. Look at the victories we've had. And Terry, I didn't speak to him about it, but he'll be in particular happy about one of those victories. Do you know which one we're talking about? I think you do. So I want to thank Paul Ryan. I want to thank our great Congressman Glenn Grothman. Where's Glenn? Glenn, thank you very much. Great job, Glenn. And we have so many other officials. But I have to thank a man who I gave it to. It's like handing the football off, and he ran for 2,000 yards that game. Because most people couldn't have done it. Terry and I have had a great relationship. And Terry was thinking about doing this. And Masa Son, you want to talk about another successful guy. He was in my office. He said, a friend of mine set it up. Said, I want to invest $50 billion in the United States. I said, you don't mean 50 billion, you mean 50 million. And that would have been okay. That would have been worth about a 5-minute meeting, 50 million. And so I thought he was saying 50 million. And when it was set up, it was 50 million, and I wanted to make it quick. But I heard about him. He, along with Terry, they're best friends, he came out, and I said, so good, what are you going to invest in? He said, yes, we're going to do. I said, you can't do that for 50 million. He said, no, I'm going to invest 50 billion. And he misrepresented to me. Because I can tell you, he did. Because he spent much more than $50 billion in the United States. And that was 2 years ago. And now they're going to do a lot more. So I want to thank Masa Son. Masa, are you back there? Come. Come. I got to get him up here. Come on up here, Masa, if you can understand what I'm saying. Come here. He doesn't play games. Doesn't like small numbers, right? Are you proud of Terry?
Yes, I am.
Say something about Terry. Come on.
Terry is my best friend, and we are the brothers.
What about me, no?
Of course. So I promised the first time I met President Trump, just before you became official president.
That's right.
I think I was the first CEO came to celebrate you.
It's true. It's true.
And I said $50 billion investment and 50,000 jobs to the United States. Because I said, no, I couldn't have decided such a thing before this new president. Because I said, now I see the passion, I see the opportunity, I'm more energized, so I made a voluntarily promise. And now I'm very happy. We're making great success, and I said, I have one more thing to promise, which is Foxconn.
That's right.
So those 3 things I promised, and I did not have official permission from Terry, but I promised.
You brought him along, right?
Yes.
You brought him along.
But I'm so happy today that my promise came to true. So this is a great historical moment because I think the United States did not have the ecosystem for new technology last 20 years. And now this is the beginning of new ecosystem of high-tech manufacturing back into the United States.
Thank you, Masa. One of the great businessmen of the world also, those two. That is some combination standing backstage. I said, whoa. But they like each other. They love each other. And his 50 billion turned out to be 72 billion so far. He's not finished yet. And that doesn't include Foxconn. So, big stuff. I want to thank another very special man. I hope he can hear me because I want him to come on stage because I handed the ball over. Terry's a friend of mine, and I recommended Wisconsin in this case. And I'll be recommending Ohio, and I'll be recommending Pennsylvania, and I'll be recommending Iowa, and I'll be recommending, but this was something that just seemed right. And the reason is that you have a car plant in a very nice location. And I flew over that plant with another great Wisconsinite, Reince. You know Reince. Good man. I think he's around here or something. He's a great guy. And I said, that would be a good site. The only problem was that site's about 1/100th the size of what they did here. You could have put one of the smaller buildings on that site. This is big stuff. But I handed it over. I said, Terry, this place is such a great place. You know, I just realized the other day they told me when we won the state of Wisconsin, it hadn't been won by a Republican since Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1952. Did you know that? And I won Wisconsin. And I like Wisconsin a lot, but we won Wisconsin. And Ronald Reagan, remember? Wisconsin was the state that Ronald Reagan did not win. And that was in 1952. And I've gotten to know the people here. They're incredible. And I said to Terry, this would be an incredible place. Then I started hearing the magnitude of what he's doing. This is magnitude like nobody's ever seen. Some of you have been able to see it. And this is just the beginning. This is just the absolute beginning. But so I had this incredible company going to invest someplace in the world, not here necessarily. And I will tell you they wouldn't have done it here except that I became president, so that's good. But they wanted to do it someplace now in the United States. And I immediately thought of the state of Wisconsin. Terry came up, fell in love with the people, fell in love with the location, fell in love with the concept here. You know, he's going to make robotics here. They're doing many other things, including full television sets. They're doing many things here, and they'll do a lot of expansion. But I had to hand off the ball. And in private life, you know, you hand off the ball, and sometimes they do a good job, and sometimes it's like, what happened? It didn't work out. Why didn't it work out? Because they didn't know what they were doing. And sometimes that happens. And there are very few governors that I could have said, good luck. You're going to build one of the largest operations in the world, over 20 million feet. Good luck. I gave it to Scott Walker. He literally didn't have to make a phone call to me for the last year and a half. He is an unbelievably talented guy. I'm telling you, Scott Walker. Scott, come here. Is Scott around, please? Scott Walker. Governor Scott Walker, come here. Come here. Two things in addition to whatever he said, he should say.
Well, thanks, Mr. President. You mentioned you got the ball rolling. Foxconn would not be in America if not for you. Back in April 27th, when you met with Terry Go and told him about not only being in America, but told him there was that pretty good site. That's an honest truth. In fact, Reince Priebus will tell you, he looked at that site. The only thing we said was we got to get a bigger site than that because this is much bigger than we ever thought. And your team in the White House, Jared, your cabinet, everybody was just hands on deck. Great team effort here, and we couldn't be more proud to have Foxconn's 8K technology LCD panels for the first time ever outside of Asia, made in the USA, proudly here in the state of Wisconsin. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We love you, man. Great thing. So I gave Scott the ball, and he carried the ball, and if that were football standards, NFL standards, he ran for about 2,000 yards in one game. Special guy, special talent. Forget about special guy. He's a special talent. So I hope he doesn't run against me, because that comment will come back to haunt me. He is a special talent and a special person. As Foxconn has discovered, there is no better place to build, hire, and grow than right here in the United States. America is open for business more than it has ever been open for business. Between our low taxes, our cutting of regulations, and we're not finished with the regulation. And we'll have regulation, but it's sensible regulation. You'll be able to get things approved quickly or disapproved. Sometimes it's going to be disapproved. We have clean air. We have crystal clean water. We're going to do all of the things you have to do, but we're going to speed up the process. You have people that wanted to build a plant like this. It would have taken them 25 years to get approvals. 25 years. They got them almost immediately. And the federal government had a lot to say. We had to get going, and they did. And here we are, and they're starting other sections right now. So we're open for business, made in the USA. It's all happening, and it's happening very, very quickly. We've created 3.4 million jobs since the election, including over 300,000 manufacturing jobs. And as you saw, the recent poll just came out, the highest percentage of happiness by manufacturers in the history of the poll, which is a very old poll. Unemployment claims are the lowest they've been in 44 years. Unemployment for African Americans is at the lowest level in history. Unemployment for Hispanic Americans, the lowest level in history. Unemployment among women, and I've been saying it, it's just changed today, is at the lowest level, and I've been telling you 21 years. It's now at the lowest level in 65 years, and it's going to be in history very soon. History sounds even better. For the workers, after 20 years, wages are rising. Remember, I used to say they did better 20 years ago than they did 2 years ago. Now they're starting to do better, and they're having their choice of jobs where they can enjoy what they're doing. And a recent study found that 95% of manufacturers, they want to get going, and they're going to get going. And we have a lot of these things happening in the United States, but to me, this is always going to be the special one, because people that are highly sophisticated, business people that have come out, look, I had a friend came out 2 weeks ago because he heard about it. He's a highly sophisticated business person that you all know. He could not believe it. He called me up, and he would love to tell me, it's nothing. He's that kind of a guy. Not really a nice guy, but he's a great businessman. He could not believe what he's seen. We are demanding from foreign countries, friend and foe, fair and reciprocal trade. We have been very much taken advantage of as a country. We've lost our companies. We've lost our jobs. They build a product, they send it in. That's why this is so beautiful, because this is as great as there is anywhere in the world, and we do it within our country. And I just want to let you know, we put tariffs on steel and aluminum. Those businesses are through the roof. U.S. Steel called me up. They're expanding or opening 6 plants. They haven't done that in 35 years. Georgetown Steel in South Carolina closed 4 years ago, closed and shuttered. They're open for business. 600 people. That's happening all over the country, all over the country. So I want to level out, and I'm doing it, level out the playing field and all of the things you hear. Some, I mean, Frankly, the smart people love it. Some people don't understand it. But we're going to be treated fairly. When our great farmers in Iowa, Wisconsin, upper New York State, when we want to sell our dairy products into Canada, they charge us 275%. 275%. Essentially what they're saying is we don't want your product. Because who's going to pay that? So we're going to level out the playing fields, folks. They send us a lot of stuff. No tax. We're going to work it out. It's going to be friendly. We love
That's
Canada.
President Trump in Wisconsin. He's at the Foxconn opening there. Meantime, there's other live events happening, and this DOJ hearing being held on Capitol Hill with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and the FBI Director Christopher Wray. They're getting questions about their department's actions, and I believe we have Catherine Herridge there with the latest. And just in the last 25 minutes, there have been a lot of developments. Catherine, are you there?
Right. Yeah, I am, Dana. There certainly have been a lot of developments, especially in about the last 60 minutes. You remember earlier today, Congressman Trey Gowdy said very dramatically, he sort of called for the special counsel to wrap up the investigation and make whatever evidence they have about collusion between Trump campaign associates and Russian officials. We've heard just in the last few minutes from the FBI director in response to a question from Democrats, and he says, listen, we're going to do this thing by the book. We're not going to be dictated by sort of any political pressure when it comes to a timetable on the Russia Council investigation. Earlier today, the House passed a non-binding resolution, 226 to 183, that calls on the Deputy Attorney General to provide the outstanding records about the Russia investigation to the relevant House committees. We had an important exchange just about 20 minutes ago from Congressman Darrell Issa with the Deputy Attorney General, and he said, if we proceed to contempt in the district court here in Washington, will you allow that to go forward? He said Eric Holder, Rosenstein's predecessor, had blocked that, and in one part of the exchange, Rosenstein said, no one is above the law. I'm not above the law. And Issa cut him off. Congressman Issa cut him off very quickly and said, I will take that as a yes. And the final point I would make is that Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein has also confirmed that the special counsel Robert Mueller has taken specific steps since the termination of FBI agent Peter Strzok from the Russia special counsel investigation to determine if any of Agent Strzok's actions on that investigation were driven by political bias. Dana.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much for that update. And that hearing is still ongoing. Let's listen in. Director Wray is being questioned right now.
If they are a Democrat or Republican and whether you should hire them. Isn't that right?
That is correct. I will say, Congressman, that I take very seriously our obligation to do our jobs apolitically, independently, and objectively, no matter who likes it, either side. I will also say that we don't subject our agents to political litmus tests. I will also say that we expect our agents to check their opinions, as you said, at the door, not unlike in this system, judges all around the country who have their own political views that range across the spectrum and sometimes hold them very deeply, or juries that have all kinds of views, or doctors that hold all kinds of views. All of them are entitled to have those views, but we need them to check those views at the door and honor their oaths, and that's what I expect of every agent, analyst, and professional staff person in the FBI.
Thank you. I deeply appreciate that. I was at the closed hearing of Peter Strzok yesterday, and I just have to say my Republican colleagues have mischaracterized his testimony. A number of his text messages have been misconstrued and mischaracterized. It is deeply ironic that my Republican colleagues are yelling and screaming about document production when they refuse to release his unredacted transcript from yesterday's closed hearing. They need to release it to the American people. We need to see Peter Strzok's testimony, and he needs to be at an open hearing. I hope my Republican colleagues will do that. Now, let me move to something that the President said in an official statement on Twitter. He said a number of times that we've got a deep state. So I asked in another hearing, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, was there a deep state at the State Department? He laughed, and he basically said, no, there was not. So, Director Wray, I'm going to ask you, is there a deep state at the FBI?
Congressman, I've never completely understood the term deep state. What I can tell you is that we have 37,000 men and women working in field offices all over the country and in league offices all over the world and they are people of character, of courage, of principle, of selflessness, and of patriotism. And that's the FBI that I see.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I hope the President stops attacking the FBI. And then let me conclude my comments to you, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein. You have shown immense courage in the face of unfair criticism and overreaching requests. Stand your ground. You took an oath to the Constitution, not to any particular administration or political party or even this Judiciary Committee. Do not produce documents that would jeopardize people's lives. Do not produce documents that can threaten sources and methods. Do not produce documents that will affect an ongoing investigation. Stand your ground. Play it straight. Do it by the book as you have been doing. And history will judge you kindly for that. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Rothfuss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. Again, let me also echo my thanks to the Department and the FBI for the tremendous work that's being done in Western Pennsylvania as we grapple with any number of issues, from the heroin epidemic to cyber issues, et cetera. I want to go to Mr. Rosenstein. The IG report noted that there were discussions about whether to employ a special counsel, but Mr. Horwitz's recent testimony was that Attorney General Lynch made the decision that she did not need to recuse. Furthermore, on page 5 of the report summary, the IG's team said, quote, we did find evidence that Comey never seriously considered requesting a special counsel. Do you think that Attorney General Lynch should have recused herself, especially after meeting with former President Clinton on the tarmac in Arizona?
Congressman, I don't have any opinion about that. I would recommend you ask Attorney General Lynch. I don't know what her state of mind was.
What level of interaction can an Attorney General have with a potential witness of a criminal investigation before they should recuse themselves?
Every case, Congressman, is evaluated based on the facts and circumstances. I believe she said that she consulted with ethics experts, and that's what I would do as well. So I don't know what the nature of that conversation was.
I would hope that if a situation similar to what she encounters you, there would be a recusal. Throughout this report, decisions related to the investigation were politically driven, whether or not they were partisan. I see evidence of them wanting to wrap things up because of an impending election. On page 4 of the summary, Director Comey also had conversations with Deputy Attorney General Yates about insisting that a special counsel be appointed the closer they got to the election. But his statement to Yates was really to pressure the DOJ to induce the department to move more quickly to obtain the Mills and Samuelson Culling laptops and to complete the investigation. I see decisions with respect to Director Comey's statements on July 2nd, October 28th, all driven by politics. And so we just had a conversation about whether what's going to control the timelines of investigations. Again, I see politics driven throughout this. Do you not?
Congressman, I do. If I could address the preface to your question, Attorney General Sessions and Director Wray and I have an understanding that we're going to have a candid relationship. We recognize some of the things that went wrong may have involved personal interactions between leaders of the department. That's not going to happen on our watch. With regard to
all right, we've been watching the hearing that the House Judiciary Committee is having with the FBI Director Chris Wray and the DOJ Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Will continue to keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, one of the candidates in tonight's Republican debate for Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis, has been a big part of today's hearing on the Hill. And joining us now is DeSantis' opponent, Florida's Agriculture Commissioner Adam Putnam. Sir, thank you for being here today. I know you'll be on later this afternoon as you debate your primary opponent. I wanted to give you a chance maybe to comment about this hearing that's been happening, the concerns about political bias, and certainly Ron DeSantis, who is one of your opponents and is in the House, has been doggedly determined to figure out a way to find out what happened there. Your thoughts?
Well, I do think it's important that the American people know, and I have a lot of confidence in Chairman Goodlatte to get to the bottom of this. Here in Florida, I'm focused on a Florida First agenda, putting vocational and technical training back into our schools, diversifying our economy, continuing to build on the strong economic foundation that we have right now, where people are moving to Florida from high-tax states because of our business climate. Record numbers of tourists are visiting here. And I'm just excited that Fox is going to be hosting our debate tonight for us to flesh out all of these things that are going to make Florida the economic engine and help America be great again.
We actually might talk to one of those, one of the people hosting the debate, Martha McCallum. If we can get her on this show, we're going to do that. A recent Fox News poll has looked at your race. You are up at 32% to DeSantis at 17%. You have 50%, though, of primary voters who are undecided. What would be your pitch to them tonight for why you would be a better choice than DeSantis?
Well, I think that the lead in the polls is a reflection of the grassroots passion and energy that we have. I've been in every town in Florida practically, the small ones and the big cities. And the same grassroots energy and passion that propelled our president into the White House is going to make me the next governor of the greatest state in the greatest nation the world has ever known. Tonight's forum, tonight's debate will give us an opportunity to speak to those undecided voters about my Florida First agenda, about putting Florida's safety first and the sheriff's endorsements that we're proud to have, about putting Florida's families first and putting jobs first, to build on the strong economic foundation that we have here in Florida, to make it even stronger and even better.
In that same poll, immigration was the top issue at 22%, health care right after that, and then the economy and gun policy and the opioids crisis at 10%. President Trump has endorsed your opponent, Ron DeSantis, and as I said, though, you are still up in the polls. When it comes to immigration, are people that you're talking to in Florida really aligned with where the president is, or do you think that they have a different perspective? I know that you have about 3 of the detention centers there in your state, and you're trying to deal with this reunification issue after the family separation policy was ended.
Well, certainly people would like to see Washington finally act on our immigration policy. President Trump has put out his pillars plan: secure our borders, end the visa lottery system, reform chain migration, and bring a permanent solution to DACA. We have to enforce our immigration laws. A nation without borders is not a nation, but we can do that in a humane way. The president has been very clear about that and keeping families together, but we have to have secure borders. We have to make sure that those immigration laws are followed, and undoubtedly, we're going to talk about that some more tonight, but it certainly is an issue that's important to Republican primary voters here in the Sunshine State.
The other issue important to Republican voters are Supreme Court vacancies, and we have one now. After just about 24 hours ago, Justice Kennedy saying he would retire. Just this week, the Supreme Court ruled in Florida's favor when it comes to the big water issue that I remember dealing with way back when I worked at the Justice Department, and you won that case.
That's right.
How important is it for the Supreme Court to have a conservative justice that would do what you think is best for Florida?
Well, first of all, the case this week regarding Florida versus Georgia, that was a big, big win for Florida. It's not the end. We've still got more to do, but it's a big win for Florida. It's just one of several really good decisions that have come out of the Supreme Court, and it illustrates how important those justice positions are. I'm thrilled that President Trump is going to get a second opportunity to put a constitutionalist on the bench so that we can continue to have the right kind of decisions coming out of our courts that protect our Constitution, not just for the Florida versus Georgia water war, but look at all of the cases that are coming out of there. This is an opportunity to have a legacy that spans decades for the president.
All right, Adam Putnam, everyone tune in tonight to see him debate his primary opponent, Ron DeSantis. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, another high-stakes summit with President Trump set to meet with Vladimir Putin. What we have learned about the upcoming meeting. Next. Are at post-Cold War lows over Ukraine, Syria, and allegations of meddling in the 2016 election.
I think the president recognizes that there may be some criticism of this decision to have the meeting. You've heard some of it here today. But that what must guide his conduct of American foreign policy is the pursuit of American national interest. And he judges correctly, in my view, that this bilateral summit between himself and President Putin is something that he needs to do and will do regardless of political criticism at home.
Joining me now is Olivier Knox. He's chief Washington correspondent for SiriusXM. You got to check out his new show. Olivier, why do we need to have a summit rather than just a meeting? And it seems like it's really elevated. And what do you think we want as our priorities? But what is Putin thinking are his priorities? Do those align?
We know it's interesting. This is going to be the culmination of a really busy stretch of diplomacy for President Trump. He has a NATO summit before that. He has a visit to the United Kingdom in between the two. And then he gets to Helsinki and meets with Vladimir Putin. There are areas in which the United States wants Russian cooperation. I'll name one obvious one, which is North Korea. There are concerns among U.S. officials that whatever cooperation Washington was getting from Beijing on international sanctions meant to pressure the regime in Pyongyang. Russia was doing what's called backfilling. In other words, where a Chinese company left, a Russian company tried to slide in. President Trump is bound to trying to make sure that Putin gets the message that Washington wants Moscow to stop that practice. That's one very clear one. There are other areas in which our interests collide. Syria, for example, Ukraine, for example. I'm not completely clear on what the president wants from Vladimir Putin in Syria, but certainly on North Korea, it's pretty obvious. In terms of the level of the meeting, yeah, you know, they had one really long meeting on the sidelines of the Group of 20 summit in July of 2017. It was more than 2 hours long. They had briefer ones on the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Forum in November. People typically criticize these summits. This particular summit is going to come in for some criticism in that there hasn't been a lot of diplomatic spade work leading into it, so it's not completely clear what either side wants.
I mean, people are going to have to get over that, I think, you know, embrace the new style. But let me ask you just one last question then. The president, there's concern by some that the president is going to go meet with Putin and that he is going to undermine NATO. I'm not so sure. You remember when President Trump went to his first NATO meeting and he did pleasantly surprised a lot of people by backing it up. He's just saying that he wants the countries that are participants to own up to their obligations and to pay enough. And some of those countries have started to do that. But are you hearing otherwise?
Well, you know, people are going to freak out a little bit no matter what about the NATO summit. What you're alluding to is a promise made by the entire alliance at their 2014 summit to pay 2% of gross domestic product towards military spending. Well, not very few, but few countries in the NATO alliance have done that. The administration, in the lead up to this summit, has been sending letters to individual countries, basically saying you're not doing enough, you need to do more. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of NATO at the summit with Vladimir Putin. I think people are probably watching just as closely whether the president has a message for Vladimir Putin about the 2018 elections.
Well, certainly. I mean, we know that that's going to be a topic, but we'll keep an eye on that. Olivier Knox, thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Right, immigration protests are building at the Mexico border. We're live in Texas as we ride along with Border Patrol agents.